Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So we are now almost halfway through the NHL season, which is insane to say. I think the New Jersey Devils have played 41 games. Most teams are like 37 through 40. But yeah, we are halfway through. And as a result, we kind of know like the 14 out of the 15 playoff spots are basically locked up at this point. There's a couple guys, Eastern Conference final wildcard spot. Maybe Calgary somehow gets in over a team in the West. But yeah, we kind of know what these teams are looking like that are going to be the playoffs. And we know which teams are probably going to be high contenders, big-time buyers at the deadline, and which ones are maybe more so just going to be happy to get in the playoffs. So today, I wanted to give my updated odds to win the Stanley Cup in terms of percentages. This isn't just going to be a copy and paste from my if the season ended today that I did 2 weeks ago bracket. It's not going to be the same styles and just strengths and weaknesses make matchups. Some teams that I maybe had losing to another team might have a higher Stanley Cup percentage because I didn't want to go extremely basic, especially with my bracket, and I never like to do that. But yeah, we're going to go through 15 teams. Not going to do the Ottawa Senators because I don't expect them to end the rebuild by making the playoffs and subsequently go on a Stanley Cup run. Also not going to do the Calgary Flames, even though they might end up making the playoffs. I'm going to go through the 15 teams right now. Every single team that's in the Western Conference, 7 out of the 8 in the Eastern Conference, and assign a percentage. And again, not going to be a carbon copy of my if the bracket ended today because this is going to be factoring in. I think this team is going to be massively aggressive at the deadline or not? Starting off with the LA Kings, I'm going to go with only 2%, and they've smashed expectations to start this year. I didn't have them in the playoffs in part because I thought they were going to suffer from Drew Doughty not being there for the first 3 to 4 months of the season, but they've been awesome, and especially in terms of analytically, they've been awesome. They're like number 1 in expected goals percentage, but I still don't think that they have the firepower, especially the star power offensively, to go on a deep playoff run. I think they maybe could win a first-round matchup in the West, potentially make the Western Conference Finals, but in terms of stringing 16 games together, where most series, they're not going to have the best or even the second-best player in a given series, and I still don't think they really have that true number 2 once Doughty gets behind that most Stanley Cup caliber teams of recent memory in just in NHL history usually have. So as a result, I don't think I'm going to get too much criticism for this. I have the LA Kings, and they're going to be the lowest out of the 15 teams at 2%. Not impossible, 1 in 50 chance, but I think it's very, very, very unlikely. For the Edmonton Oilers, who have eliminated the LA Kings the last 3 seasons, I have them at 13%. Ever since they had their little bit of a hiccup to start this season, they've looked the part of a contender, especially offensively. We expect from them offensively to be an elite team. And defensively, I think Darnell Nurse has been a big-time step. He's stepped up a big amount for this team, considering last year in the regular season and especially come playoff time, he was a little bit of a liability. Still not worth $9.25 million, but he has definitely been much better. Stuart Skinner got to be more consistent. We've seen it back-to-back seasons now. He starts horrendously, then he kind of finds his game, and he was very good for them in like games 4 through 7. I think he had like a 10-2 record or like something insane like that in like a 9-20. So he has clutched up for them once the season fully gets underway, but he needs to be more consistent. I think they need to add preferably a second pair right-handed defenseman for a guy like Darnell Nurse. I don't think Troy Stetcher or Ty Emberson is the long-term answer in Edmonton, but I still think considering what they did last year, considering they have McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, all those elite players, Bouchard, Ekholm, they're still arguably the favorite in the Western Conference, and I expect them to be ultra aggressive at this year's deadline, considering it's the last year of Leon Draisaitl making 8.5 and Bouchard making 3.9. So the Edmonton Oilers are still very high on my list at 13%. The Dallas Stars, 8%. And if you watched my if the season ended today, what my bracket would be, I had them losing in the first round, but I think they still have the potential to be a true contender in the Western Conference. If the season ended today, I would not pick them to go far in the playoffs. I didn't pick them to go far, but they still have all the makings. They just got to put it together. They're stars with Heiskanen, Robertson, and Hintz. They got to play better because this team is still one of the deepest and one of the most complete teams in the entire NHL. I think the right side of the defense definitely needs to be addressed. Currently, they're 18th in the NHL in terms of expected goals against at 5-on-5 per 60 compared to offensively. That's 3rd even with Robertson and Hintz kind of struggling. So I think they need to make some kind of defensive splash. This team, if they start playing better, they're going to be a premier contender. Just right now, it has been a little bit up and down, back and forth. And they need to get Tyler Seguin healthy. He's a question mark. He was out, what was it, 3 weeks ago? He was deemed like 4 to 6 months out. So he might miss the first or second round. That's going to be big for a team considering he was clicking like a point per game guy. And that second line was awesome for Dallas. I'm going to go with conservative 8% right now for the Dallas Stars. The Boston Bruins, I'll go with 6%. On paper, not that impressive of a team, but I think that they do have that physicality where I could see them potentially going on a deep run. I had them in the Stanley Cup final in the preseason. Yeah, they got just solid two-way physical guys. And Jeremy Swayman, thank God, is finally looking like the Jeremy Swayman of last season, where he was the best goalie in the entire NHL come playoff time or in the playoffs. In his last 7 games, he has a 4-2-1 record with a 921. He needs to get back on track. McAvoy needs to step it up offensively. Lindholm needs to get healthy. That's big. But under Joe Sacco, they have been a much better team, 12-7-1. And as a result, I think they're going to be a very tough out for whatever team they face in the playoffs and could go on a run. The New Jersey Devils, I am going to be going with 12%. If my season ended today, they were my Stanley Cup pick as of right now. I think that this team truly has no weakness whatsoever. They have like a top 5, top 6 in the NHL, a solid bottom 6, a top 5 defense core, and like a top 8 tandem in their special teams have been very good this season. The one thing that maybe concerns me a little bit and why I don't have them over in Edmonton, or let's see if they're my favorite in the Eastern Conference, is just because they are a little bit, some of their guys are more smaller skilled guys. We kind of saw it in 2023 with Carolina. If they get a bad matchup in terms of physicality versus Carolina, versus Washington, versus Florida, who they might have to play consecutively in the Eastern Conference, there could potentially be a flaw exposed in terms of the lack of size with some of their star players. But I still think that they are probably the most complete team in the Eastern Conference. And when they're playing their best, I think they might be arguably the best team in the entire NHL. So I got them at 11%. I still got them at a very good 11%. The Colorado Avalanche, I'm going to go with 7%. This probably was like 4% before they traded for Blackwood and Wedgwood. But now that they have solid goaltending, they're a top 10 probably contender in the entire NHL. They obviously have the star power. In most series, they're probably going to have 3 out of the top 4 players in a series, 3 out of the top 5 with that 3-headed monster, in their 5th in goals per game as a result. They're an offensive juggernaut. The defensive depth does scare me a little bit, and they don't have a ton of assets to trade, considering they traded a second to get Blackwood, as well as they traded their first back in the Sean Walker deal. So I don't know what they're going to be exactly at the deadline this year, but they could beat anybody just because that offensive firepower is so dangerous. As a result, I have them at 7%. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I got them at 8%. I think that they are not even sneaky top-tier contenders or decent contenders. I think that they're just a contender when looking at the fact that their offense is the best in the entire NHL by 0.2 goals per game this season, and the underlying numbers are also very good. And just you look at their roster, you look at their forward core, and no shit, their offense is so has so much firepower. But it's not only just the offense like it was maybe last year. Vasilevsky is playing far better, and .913 save percentage, playing like a top 6, top 7 goalie in the NHL compared to last year where he was a little bit of a liability. And Victor Hedman has regained massive steps in terms of his defensive game in 2023, 2024 was lackluster, was kind of just straight up bad defensively. He's playing very good again. Getting a guy like Ryan McDonough has really stabilized that defense core. And as a result, Tampa Bay is a well-balanced offensive juggernaut. They could beat anybody in the Eastern Conference. 8%, a 1 in about 12.5% chance, if my math is on that correct. They're definitely a serious threat. The Carolina Hurricanes, I'm going to go with 4%. This is kind of a retool year, or at least coming into the season, it was viewed as a retool year. I don't expect them to be nuclear aggressive at this year's deadline, and I still think that they lack if they didn't go on a deep run last year and lost to the New York Rangers after going down 3-0, I don't really expect them to go this year. They're still a very well-coached defensive team, suppress chances, dominate in terms of Corsi, but I don't think that they have the finishing to go on a deep run, even with the great start by Marty Necas. He's starting to come back down to earth. Don't think they have the offensive firepower, and Kachekhov's been a little bit of a question mark. Anderson has been hurt nonstop. I'm kind of out on the Carolina Hurricanes this year. I think next year they add Nicky Shin. They maybe make some more tweaks and maybe pull off a big move for a big-time sniper or a legit second-line center. That's the other thing. They still got goddamn Kotkaniemi as their second-line center. I can't believe in that. I cannot. Watch this be the one year that they actually go on that deep run. I think everybody's counting them out, not just myself. So I just don't see it right now for the Carolina Hurricanes. Next up for the Washington Capitals, I'm also going to go with 4%. A very well-balanced team. Do they have the top-end talent to go on that deep Stanley Cup run, according to similarly to a Los Angeles Kings? That's kind of where my question marks come in. On top of that goalie tandem, do they have that one guy that can grab it by the balls and go on a 25-game stretch to win a Stanley Cup? They're going to be adding Ryan Leonard come playoff time. It's going to be interesting to see what they do at the deadline. If they really sell some assets in terms of just one last run with Ovechkin, they could beat they could be people in the Eastern Conference. I wouldn't bet on it. Again, I'd go with New Jersey. Carolina versus them would be a little bit of a toss-up. They are the 1 seed right now, so they might have to play them in the first round. But still, Washington right now, I think 4% is fair. They're definitely a legit, true team. Not trying to doubt them, but I just don't have them that high. Minnesota, I'm going to go with 6%. This team needs to get healthy badly. It feels like everybody on this team has been injured at some point. If they're healthy, and if Joel Eriksson and Boldy can step up, offensively, they have been a little bit lackluster. They're obviously great defensively, but Eriksson only has like 15 points in 25 games. Boldy was looking like he was taking that next step to like point per game, has really slowed down of late. I think Gustafsson is legit in terms of being a top 10 guy, probably not the second best goalie in the NHL like he is this season, and I'm not sure they're going to be ultra aggressive at the deadline. That's the one thing where I'm confused. I had them in the Western Conference Finals if the season ended today, but considering they don't have their 2025 first round pick and they are still very cap tight, I don't expect them to be ultra aggressive at the deadline compared to maybe some other teams in the Western Conference. So don't call me a hypocrite for having the Western Conference. And I still have them at 6%. I still am going to sell it to you 6%. I know I sound like I'm trashing on them. They definitely could, considering they have that three-headed monster in terms of defensemen. The goalie looks legit, and they have a true superstar. Still could go on a run. Wouldn't quite bet on it based on what I've seen in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Is maybe a little bit discouraged. Winnipeg, I'm going to go with 5%. It would require Hellebuck absolutely balling out, but Hellebuck has been by far the best goalie of the 2024 calendar year in the NHL. So if he goes on a nuclear run, they definitely could. The defense score still scares me a little bit, which is why it's at 5%. If they make some kind of big defenseman splash, especially on that right side, I think I would bump this up to like 7, 8, maybe even 9%, because I think the forward core has been very encouraging. That top line is really, really clicking. All those guys are on pace for like career seasons on top of Ehlers bouncing back, having a resurgence of late when Rick Bowness barely played him last year, played him like 14, 15 minutes a night. He's over point per game right now. So yeah, Winnipeg, 5%, definitely a factor in the Western Conference. Wouldn't quite put them in that top tier, but definitely a serious threat. The Vegas Golden Knights, my shocks people, I'm only going to go with 5%. Their team defense has not really improved. It was very bad to start the season, and it's still pretty goddamn bad. It was like 5th or 4th worst expected goals against per 60 in like November. It's only at 7th right now. The teams are like the worst teams in the NHL, and then the New York Rangers are one of the worst teams in the NHL. But like the worst teams in the NHL are the only teams that are ahead of them, and even their offense has been a little bit fluky. They're like 4th or 5th in the NHL in expected goals scored above expected. Still a good team. Still has a shit ton of experience. Still a very physical team. But I think that defense core is a little bit overrated because guys like Pietrangelo and Theodore, although they're very good offensive defensemen, don't play a lot of defense, and they have been getting exposed. And I'm not sure Eden Hill, although he was great in that one playoff, and in that playoff run in 2023, their defense score was far better back then, at least defensively. I'm not sure that he can overcome that for the Vegas Golden Knights. So as a result, I still have them at a very healthy 5%, but I don't have them that high. The Florida Panthers, I'm going to go with 10%. And I know what you guys are going to scream, didn't you have Boston beating them in your bracket if the season ended today? Again, that is true, but I like to pick some upsets. And again, styles and weaknesses and strengths create matchups. So I still think Florida, if you put a gun to my head, who's more likely to win the Stanley Cup? Yeah, I'd go with the Florida Panthers or the Boston Bruins, but I decided to go with Boston in that matchup. Florida, still a true top-tier contender. All of their guys are two-way beasts that seem to elevate their game every single year in the playoffs. Why I have them below Edmonton and New Jersey, in part, I'm not that high on that defense core outside of their top two guys, and Bobrovsky looks like he has regressed in terms of his stats at decent fall off, and you could definitely attribute that to just exhaustion. He has played back-to-back seasons of making the Stanley Cup final, but it has not been that pretty from Bobrovsky, and he is 36 years old, so that's a little bit scary. But yeah, Florida, still top 3, top 4 contender in the entire NHL. Don't get it twisted. And then we got the Vancouver Canucks. I'm going to go with 3%. This is like the Dallas Stars. If they pull it together and lock the hell in, this is probably 7, 8, maybe even 9% if they start getting in a flow state. But right now, considering the division with Pettersson and Miller, it seems like it's legit. There's definitely something there at this point. And Demko got hurt yet again. I know it's not a serious injury, but I cannot rely on this guy to stay healthy at all. Philip Hronek's still hurt. It's bad. And even outside of the defense core, Tyler Myers is actually pretty solid, but outside of Hughes and Hronek, it is kind of a very lackluster defense core. So I'm kind of out on Vancouver right now. Things could definitely change, but the way that it's been trending the past 2 to 3 weeks, it's getting ugly in Vancouver. As a result, 3%. And then lastly, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm gonna go with 6%. I think that if you change the logo, I probably have them like 7 to 8%, but just the history with the Toronto Maple Leafs with some of their star players in terms of not showing up in the playoffs. Austin Matthews, and although he's coming back tonight, he has been injured a decent amount. In their ads of guys like Tanev and OEL, I think are great playoff ads, especially for this season. Again, those contracts are far too much term, but this season should be good. But yeah, if Toronto draws Florida or Boston in the first round, I'm not loving their Tampa Bay in the first round. I'm not loving those matchups. Still a very good team, still a healthy 6%, but I can't fully believe in the Toronto Maple Leafs just because every single year it seems like they disappoint in the playoffs. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these percents? Who am I too low on? Who am I too high on? I think I added them up and they were like 97.5%. So yeah, I'm leaving like 0.75% for the Ottawa Senators, 0.5% for Calgary, the Eastern Conference teams that potentially could go on a St. Louis Blues run. Save some percent for them. It doesn't equal 100%. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? I'll be seeing you in the next one.